so people need to see into it. We just all watched the rather devastating resin video together, as you know, and I'm sure people are very much primed with questions about it. Does anyone want to kick off with a question to Nick? Do you want to say anything about yourself, Nick, for a moment?
I can do, yes, it probably makes sense. Yes, so hi, I'm Nick. I'm the UK policy manager with the Pesticide Action Network UK. We're the only UK charity that tackles everything to do with pesticides and the problems they cause. We've been running for about 35 years. I suppose one of the things I'm running on 10 years is our Pesticide-Free Towns campaign. We've been trying to stop councils using pesticides, and for the most part that is glyphosate. We've got nearly 100 councils so far, different sizes up and down the country, have stopped or reduced their use, and we're currently pushing for a national ban on the use of pesticides in public spaces, so that's possibly the most relevant thing here. And I will say another thing that you just watched. I've been doing this for 18 years, so I'm pretty well up to date with everything that's going on, but seeing everything in one place as that was presented, I found that quite shocking as well, so I can only imagine what others must think, but yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thanks very much. Right, who'd like to kick off? Right, okay. Do you want to just say what your name is?
Comment on what I've just seen. Yeah, I'm Dawn Myron. We're in a lovely historic building here, and I actually feel as if that talk should have been in 1825, not 2025, based on the fact that they were using animals in all those experiments, like the Victorians did, and animals are animals, and we're all different. You know, for example, I react really well to codeine phosphate. It's a brilliant paper for me. It doesn't work for my brother because he's genetically different. Even within humans, you get differences. And he admitted that the animal research is so rubbish that they have to times it by 100 to compensate for the errors in it. And I'm just so disappointed that they're still using animals in laboratories in 2025 because there's no need for it. It could be different.
Okay, Nick, any comments on that?
No, not particularly. That's unfortunately the way things are done. I agree, and I'm sure there are urgent needs to move away from animal testing, which have and are being done. But unfortunately, that seems to be what regulatory science is based upon at present. It's not actually that long ago that they stopped testing pesticides on human subjects, particularly in the US. But yeah, I agree. In the world they are, we could, I'm sure, find better ways of doing things. But unfortunately, that is what the regulatory system is based upon, and the regulatory system is not up to the task that it's supposed to do, which is protect us and the environment from the impact of pesticides. So actually, if we didn't use them at all, there wouldn't be any need for pet testing whatsoever. So that is a better argument for not using them.
Yeah, thanks. Anyone else got a question?
Hi there, thanks for coming. But yeah, quick question about why you think the regulators stroke governments don't listen to the evidence. Clearly there's lots of lobbying money, but is part of it because it isn't actually that easy to solve it? We've got all our modern agricultural practices built on mass intensification, so if you literally stop using some of these herbicides on some of these invasive, inverted commas, or pestilent weeds, inverted commas again. The only other solution is to go back to alternative historic farming practices, surely, which literally upends the whole agricultural business. So do you think it's that it's literally difficult or perceived to be hugely difficult?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things I think there. I think the first point, that there's an awful lot of money in pesticides. seeds, and so they push for GM and all these other things to basically control the agricultural systems. So there is a huge problem with that. There's absolutely no doubt about it, and they have a lot of support from the National Farmers Union, who plays a good political wing in the agricultural industry. And frankly, our politicians are weak-willed and lack any kind of vision or aspire to follow anything through. In terms of it's difficult to replace, well, you're right. The pesticide is what basically allows industrial scale agriculture to proceed. So, pesticides are a massive contributor to climate change as a result of that, given the emissions, etc., from industrial agriculture. Making changes is not difficult if the will to do so is there. Actually, there's a really great organisation called the Nature Friendly Farmers Network, who are not organic, but they're making huge reductions in their inputs of both fertilisers and pesticides in particular. And that model is great because actually it saves farmers money, so actually their income goes up. And what we've been sold for years, certainly since the end of the Second World War, is this yield is king. You must grow more food. The bigger the yield, the better the farm. And that's how a farmer's success is measured. And that's nonsense, absolute nonsense. We don't need to keep producing as much food. In fact, that again itself is a lie that we need to produce more food to feed a growing population. We produce too much food. Too much food is wasted. The whole food system is in disarray, it's broken. What we need to do is allow farmers to grow good food, sustainably, that won't harm the environment, but then will also allow them to make an income. And yes, that can be done. Again, we need support from the government, and that is non-existent. It would need to be shown to work, which there are people doing that. And there's a lot to be learned as well from organic production, which is not the answer, certainly not in the short term. But there's a lot of learning that can be done about how to deal with pests and diseases. For example, a river, they don't have problems with slugs because they've built up their soil health, whereas overuse of pesticides destroys soil health, and you get all these ongoing things, but it's this cycle of pesticide use. But yes, you can actually move away from it, but it would be concerted and political will and support for farmers to do it, and it can't just be left to farmers to do it on their own. But it has to be for their benefit as well. But it is possible. It's not going to happen tomorrow.
I'm thinking of Kilo, who were talking about what happened when Russia withdrew, Soviet Union withdrew, and they were pretty dependent on chemicals, and they faced starvation and did actually go back to more traditional methods and survive. So it's possible, isn't it? Just need to stop the
And that's, just to add to that, of course, one of the big problems is what farmers get paid. So the supermarkets, the big retailers, they're offering farmers not what it costs to grow their crops. So farmers are really stuck. They can't make changes, even if they lose a little bit of their yield because they're trying something different. That's going to push them into the And so there's no support from retailers either, and consequently there's no support from the public. So actually there's a lot of people who have got to step up and play their part if we are going to reduce this for the benefit of all.
Jerry Fergins, I live just very close by here, and on our road, our little road, they've stopped using glyphosate there, partly through neighbour interaction and so on. And we now have a very good list of plant species growing up and down the road, and it's heartwarming to see. So it shows the difference that takes place. In fact, so much so that I actually conducted a guided walk just on our road that took an hour and a half to do 300 yards. So it really is good. There is a drawback though, and I'm interested to see how the councils who've stopped using glyphosate on streets are acting, because the woody plants start to grow, and at some point they have to be removed, and it's okay to remove them manually while they're young, but I'm a botanist and I know what's what and what's growing there, and I can see that, but what happens in areas where it's not used? How do they control the woody plants that can
But basically, we've seen regular species popping up on the streets of Britain because they've stopped using glyphosate. So it happens, it can happen very quickly when it's done. Two answers to that. One is actually trying to repair the infrastructure, because actually plants don't cause damage. Plants will exacerbate the problem by getting into things that are already damaged. So actually spend a little bit of money, a little bit of time trying to fix the infrastructure that is crumbling all over the place. That aside, just set a policy that puts in place a work, and we're not going to spray in general. But if there's a need for to protect infrastructure or for public health or accessibility, getting rid of invasive species, then yes, we can use a judicious amount of this in a very controlled manner to deal with the problem. So it's about having some kind of a balance. Now, and it is absolutely possible. Every town, city, village in France, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, and many other places across Europe, no longer use pesticides for maintenance, maintenance of their cities. They don't know what they have, they've not been overrun, they haven't just crumbled with the dust, etc. So it is possible. And again, it's this political will that seems to be lacking, and there seems to be an all or nothing thing. So we're going to spray when we do everything, but it's finding out something that actually works, and developing a holistic approach to dealing with this. But also fending off a very small minority who will write a letter of complaint to the council to complain about what the meantime they want a better description. And that's the problem. People who want to complain will write to the council. It's very uncommon. Somebody really likes something that's being done to write and congratulate the council and say we want more of this kind of thing. So I was talking to the council and had so many complaints. I had 60 complaints from this. Well, that seems like an awful lot. So they're all from the same three people. So really, if you want to see change, you have to support your council to show them that they're doing the right thing to outweigh those forces, and rather more civically to show them that actually you might consider voting for them if you do this. So again, it's getting the people that are likely to speak about what they're doing and counteract that. It's not difficult. But there are solutions again for things like invasives, etc. There's a lot of work being done on alternatives.
Okay, thanks for that. Just one more question, if I may, and that is the EU extension to glyphosate was made in 2023 for 10 years, I think. Is that right?
Yeah.
Do you think we'll see a change to that before 33, or do you think that will be the point at which it alters?
Well, again, there's a couple of things here as well, because this is the world of pesticides, and things are black and white, yes or no answer, which I suppose is what I'm doing. So, my colleagues in Pesticide Action Network Europe have launched a court case against the authorisation because so much was left out of it. That is rumbling on, and could very well result in things being overturned before then. In terms of the UK, we were supposed to be looking at re-approval process for it in December of this year, but because DEFRA didn't launch public consultation, they postponed that until December 2026. But earlier discussions earlier in the year about the UK-EU reset have resulted in the UK agreeing to follow the EU's regulatory system on pesticides, so we'll be in dynamic alignment with them. So we will either follow exactly what the EU do, well that's basically it really, or we could ban it and we could go further. But one useful thing about the EU approval was is a ban on the use of glyphosate as a pre-harvest desiccant, and that's what they spray it on arable crops to dry them out before harvesting. And that has really seen a huge increase in glyphosate use. I think it's about 900% in the last 20 years in terms of use of glyphosate in the arable sector, and much of that is to do with pre-harvest desiccation. So actually just bringing that in will make a huge reduction in the amount of glyphosate that's being released into the environment. So we will, yes, we are going to follow up as we that's it, or we'll go further if we can make that case.
I was wondering how much the study has got to the government? And is there a mechanism that can help them publicise what's happened, or are they sending it to individual MPs, or how does it work? And is there anything these workers can do?
That's exactly what we're doing. I think we've already got some information from our colleagues in the EU looking at why that was so, support our risk assessment. We are also undertaking further studies which will be releasing next year, and that will be directly aimed at the Health and Safety Executive, DEFRA, the various ministers, all the various things like the Environmental Committee, the EFRA Committee, and our range of MPs and the actually all jurisdictions in the UK. So there's a lot of nations as well. So we will definitely be pushing that next year. We've been releasing a lot of other stuff as well. We've just done a study on playgrounds, Glyphosate in playgrounds, children's playgrounds, which is quite shocking. I don't want to spoil it for everyone, but that'll be out in the next few weeks. And I have to apologise for actually testing around Sheffield. But because we left the EU, getting samples over to the lab in Belgium proved impossible, and it took 2 months to return to the EU, which some samples were no longer usable. So it could be a good thing, could be a bad thing in Sheffield. But we will be releasing that in the next couple of weeks. So yeah, that's one of the strands. A lot going on, we'll be pushing hard. Because it's a really useful opportunity to not just highlight this one pesticide, but to highlight what's wrong with the system as a whole. And this is a really good one. It's one of the few pesticides that the public are aware of as well. So I think this is a golden opportunity to really push the message that the whole system needs to change, not just around glyphosate.
That's great, thank you. Yeah, it's how you keep feeding into community groups. I mean, obviously you're here, which is fantastic. That question
Sorry,
okay. Yeah, how are you kind of connecting in with community groups and environmental groups and stuff? I mean, you're here, that's fantastic. But,
well, I've spent 10 years now talking to people like yourselves. I've got another meeting on Thursday night in Essex. We did a lot of community groups, and actually when we set up our Pesticide Action Network 10 years ago, that was the point of it. It was just me. Obviously I can't get out to every town, city, village in the UK, but so we made a whole range of information and materials to allow local groups, local communities to create their own campaigns. And over the years, I suppose we've had about 150 campaigns up and down the country running. Still many of them doing things as well, really putting pressure on their local councils. As far as... Sorry. Go on.
Oh, just a little bit of conversation we've been having about how, in a way, this report is such a good opportunity for reviving the interest in glyphosate, because there have been campaigns here for, a survey going for 10 years in Sheffield, and it's just, it just seems a good opportunity to spread the word.
Well, I think the time's right.
Hello, I'm Linda Joss from Nest. I was interested to hear you say there that you've been doing some testing in playgrounds and what have you, because the question I was going to ask was, are there large studies happening that are looking at the exposure of people generally to glyphosate, either through environmental factors or through the food that they're eating or the water that they're drinking? And are these big enough, if there are these big enough surveys to be worth publicising and maybe community groups like us possibly using them for some kind of leverage with our council?
The short answer is no, there aren't. This is the first time so I'm aware that playgrounds have been studied. We do a report on pesticide residues in food every year, and there are glyphosate residues in food. There have been a few, so the smaller studies about Which leads into a bigger question about the lack of data. We don't actually know what's going out into the environment in the first place. There is absolutely no information about the quantity, the type of pesticides that are being used by the public in our homes and gardens, because there's no access to sales data or use data. Our towns and cities, the survey that they do every few years is woefully limited and lacking. So the last one was published by the government, it was in 2022, and they surveyed golf courses and rail transport infrastructure and MOD land as well as other councils, and they reported a total usage of 120,000 kilograms of pesticide active substance. We've just done a freedom of information request report to 400 councils, not all of them were answered, and we've got figures of 320,000 kilograms. So there's huge discrepancies. We don't know what's being used in agriculture with any clarity, certainly not any detail, so you can't actually go down and look at what the farms around you are using, and how that might be impacting on the environment or people's exposure. So regardless of the fact we don't actually have studies, we don't actually have data and details on what is being put out there in the first place, which I think is frankly unforgivable.
Hello, my name is Harriet. I was wondering, within agriculture, if you and any sensible person is advocating reducing or not using pesticides, what can the UK then sort of advise? Is it more a kind of tolerating unwanted plants and or alternative removal or suppression methods?
In agriculture, it very much depends what you're growing and where you are. And you know, there are awful lots of techniques available on the sort of the integrated pest management ladder that goes through the varieties you choose to grow to crop rotations and planting plants that come along and mixing things up together. There's a whole range of different ways. It's very crop and location specific what you might do, which is why it's so useful that the Nation-Friendly Farms Network are on, because they're real farmers out on the ground, able to talk to other farmers about their real life experiences, and that really is the best way of doing it. And yeah, so there's a lot of talk about some of the high-tech and precision farming, but that's really just allowing the industrial farm-style things to go ahead, because then people can afford those things and are very wealthy landowners rather than farmers. So there's a lot of information out there that is slowly being disseminated amongst farmers by farmers. So I can't be any more specific than that.
Okay, thank you.
I once spoke to a council worker who was busy spraying glyphosate on the pavements, and he didn't have a mask. I just wonder what you would say to him and to his union about health and safety regarding spraying glyphosate.
Why worry? It's what you're saying. You told that to the government. Interestingly, the unions have been quite concerned about it, and not that long ago, GMB, who is their union, called for a ban on glyphosate to protect its members and the public from potential harms of glyphosate. Government, I mean, again, it depends on what product it was you sprayed, but there might not even be a in the tropics, so the use of PPE is, well, it's not a personal choice, but the best way to not worry about that is not to use it in the first place, would be my view. But I think for councils, I think something worth bearing in mind is the potential financial jeopardy for lawsuits. There have been an awful lot, I mean, talking hundreds of thousands of lawsuits in the US, people, groundskeepers, others contracting on mushrooms and environment as a result of their exposure to glyphosate. And they're given all the billions in compensation. It does leave the council, who are directly operatives to use glyphosate, open to potential future legal cases. We're starting to see some similar moves in Europe. It will only be a matter of time before something happens here. So again, in terms of making an argument to the council, future-proofing their financial. What it would amount to is, well, it wouldn't for those actually using it. All that really is what was allowed to be on our food as a pesticide residue. In my view, there is no acceptable daily intake. Why should any of us welcome having pesticides put into our bodies either through exposure or through the food we eat? Frankly, it's chemical trespass. I didn't ask for it, I don't want it. And they shouldn't be there in the first place. So, yes, I agree that should be changed, but ultimately we don't want any kind of intake because it's not acceptable.
Yeah, I agree, but I was just wondering how these things are managed and how the regulatory process works.
Yeah, I mean, if that were to be the case, then it would make it a lot harder to use because there would be, at the moment, just hypothetical figures. So, for example, an apple could have 10 whatever of glyphosate on it. If you lower the ADI, you only have one. That might not be possible to be achieved, so you have to stop using it for that. So that is how it would drive it down.
Hello, Nicola. I just wondered, does it biodegrade or is it a forever chemical?
It's not a forever chemical, but it also doesn't disappear like the manufacturers and many of the supporters will tell you it does. It does last as residue, it is mobile, it does, well, as our playground studies show, it stays in the soil, it stays on the ground, it stays on swings and roundabouts and slides. It also transfers to water and has a breakdown product called AMPA, which is often ignored but is equally as toxic, which is particularly harmful to aquatic organisms and also much more resistant to glyphosate itself. So whilst it's not a forever chemical as such, it does linger in the environment.
That's well from this. 2 points. The first one is, do you think that the effect on humans is a more effective lever than its effect on biodiversity? And the second point is to do with direct action. Direct action against genetic modification of crops is quite effective. What direct action might be effective in stopping pesticides?
Great. Yeah, that's a very interesting question, first one. And one would kind of see that human health would be the driver of people's concerns, but I've been doing this for a long time. Frankly, nobody was interested in human health and the impacts of pesticides on it. It really wasn't until the bees started dying as a result of neonicotinoid contamination that the public really sat up and started taking interest, which was fantastic, which allows us to talk about human health. And whilst there is sort of spotty interest in it, I think the most convincing arguments for councils have been about biodiversity and about the environment, whether it's water contamination or it's plant diversity or the impact on bees and pollinators, etc. So actually I would say the most compelling argument is around biodiversity and the fact that we stop using it to improve biodiversity, about council and biodiversity targets or make sure we cover whatever it is, or even climate emergency things that people have declared. So yes, I think that is the believer, and you can use that and also talk about human health. Although of course I think the playground thing might spike some interest because of the, it's quite an emotive subject with children and playgrounds, etc. So we'll wait and see, but definitely that's a strong one. And then the second question I've completely forgotten.
Direct action.
Just remind me.
What direct action?
Direct action. Yeah. Well, I think in agriculture it's difficult because you don't actually know where it's gone, and actually destroying crops is what glyphosate is for. So just going out and doing what they did in GM might be actually not great. Certainly in towns and cities, I think a direct positive action, and we have seen this in quite a few towns around the country, is local communities going out and doing the weeding themselves, actually taking matters into their own hands and saying to the council, we don't want to spray our street, we will make sure it's clear of any weeds that are impacting accessibility, we will leave those plants that are perfect type of being they're not doing harm to anyone that might be doing some benefit to our population and other things. And taking that into our hands, I think that is the really positive way to do it. Frankly, at the moment, the funding for councils and decide anything you do to help will help win them over. And if you do that, I think that's a really positive message. It's also a really good way of developing social cohesion and making friends with people in the street and cities all over the place. So I think taking matters into your own hands is really good, but doing it in a very positive, constructive way that actually can benefit everyone and really have a knock-on effect and show others what to do.
Any questions? You can ask all this.
Hi, I'm Deborah Cardish, part of XR Pests. So we've been doing some local action on this for a few years. I'm just wondering how important is education in all of this, because, we're a small group, about 30 people, and I don't feel, even though we've done protests in the streets and kind of trying to raise awareness of the issue, that the majority of people are aware of this at all. How important it is for all of us to try and get this message across to the wider public, and how do we do that?
Great question. Well, that's just spend every day you've got working life try to answer that question. The public is understandably bombarded with so many things, not least trying to figure out etc. But it's difficult to cut through that. And people are often very shocked when they do find out about what's going on. I think it's just a question of doing things like you're doing here, and going out and telling as many people as you possibly can after the event tonight, and keep plugging away. One thing I will say is since I started doing this, actually a little bit of public awareness, not just public awareness, but many others, including the big retailers, some with limited number of our politicians. Awareness and interest and understanding that actually we need to be doing something has grown quite significantly. We're in a much different place than we were 18, 19 years ago. So it is getting out there, and it's just a matter of keeping on going. But we're not particularly education focused, but I do think there's a need for schools to take this on. I really find it hard to believe that I would say that the vast overwhelming majority of schools in the UK are currently spraying glyphosate around their playgrounds and around various areas. And there are some initiatives to make schools more sustainable, and we've got some great advice on how a school can go pesticide free. But I think getting that message into schools will only both reduce immediate exposure, but also educate young people sort of going forward, so they'll have that base level of knowledge in the first place. So there's a lot that needs to be done still, but it is getting out there slowly.
Thank you.
I just wanted to follow up the point about direct action. One way to help get people on our side is to, if you know your plants, do some chalking on the pavement and explain to the local people what the different plants are and how they attract the butterflies and bees. And I know Jodie put stories abroad that. Another point, unfortunately, Sheffield Council are now getting quite a few complaints about weeds going in the pavement because they have reduced the use of glyphosate. So I really want to encourage everyone today to write to your councillor and say we do not want glyphosate on our pavements, on our playgrounds, on our streets, because these councils listen to the complaints and they say, well, Sheffield wants us to spray. So we've got to tell them the truth. We need to stop using glyphosate. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Right, any more questions? Anyone? Anyone else has anything yet or wants to follow up? Right, well, thank you very much, Nick. We really appreciate you coming in today, and yeah, I hope we can take some direct action perhaps as a result, or at least certainly a little bit of informing work. I just think it's such an important study that people really do need to know about it. So thanks very much.
Just before I go, so we've got loads of stuff on our website. It's all free to use for anybody to take, print off, read, distribute, whatever you want. So we've got whole sections on campaigns, also guides for council, alternatives. We've got a paper plant guide, which is really great about what people can find out there. That's great to hand out. It's the schools policy. We've got a whole range of things. You are all welcome to download it, read it, distribute it, and spread it out as you like. And yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me. And if anybody's got any questions, feel free to drop me an email at any point.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed.